They're strange, right? And they seem to have popped up out of nowhere. And now, I see them everywhere. I've seen them at schools, at churches. Some are stuck to the sides of buildings, and others disguised as trees. Question: what are they, and what are they doing? Well, the answer is, they're cell sites and towers, and they make all of our wireless technology possible. But how do they work? And are they safe? And if one tower goes up in your neighborhood and that's considered safe, what if 5 or 10 or even 100 towers go up? Have you ever wondered how you're able to talk and send messages with your phone in real time? That's because the signal moves at the speed of light, because it is light. And cell towers are constantly working both ways, beaming and receiving signals. Cell sites work on the principle of resonance. That is, each site is calibrated or tuned to oscillate at a specific frequency. It's much like dialing in a radio station. The frequency lies somewhere between the radio and microwave spectrum. It's considered non-ionizing radiation, meaning that it doesn't damage DNA. Using a steady flow of electricity, the signal is amplified into the air. If your cell phone or receiver transmitter is tuned to that frequency, then your phone and the corresponding tower can talk. The whole thing is truly a modern miracle of engineering and mathematics. We take it for granted that we can surf the internet and talk with each other on virtually thin air. But are there any drawbacks to this technology? After all, in the 1990s, hardly anyone owned a cell phone, and now most of us have one. And with them, the amount of man-made radio and microwave radiation in the air has accelerated exponentially. Surprisingly, the whole grid went up without any independent long-term health studies. But would telecom companies with billions of dollars to gain lie to us about potential harm? Well, I'm just one small American, and this is my journey to find out, and I'm going to start locally. Here's my front door. Now I'm going to pan the camera, moving across the street. And do you see that apartment complex right there? It seems normal enough, right? Let's take a closer look. On all 4 corners of the building are wooden facades. Behind the wooden facades, cell phone towers. Keep in mind this is a residential building, and there are apartments right below each one of these towers. I'm now about 50 paces away from the last clip. 50 paces down the street. Okay, now, look. Right here, do you see it? There it is. A whole other tower. Again, don't you think it's strange that this tower was allowed to go up, with the amplifiers being almost at the same level as the top of this building? I mean, they're right there. People are living here. Anyway, I found this sign. It's a warning that I found at the bottom of one of these towers, basically telling you that there is an FCC limit to human exposure. So were the people living here ever told about these limits? But I digress. So now I am 25 paces away from the last clip, and as you can see, there is another tower. It's one of those tree ones. So if you count the mast that looks like a tree, the big chunky one that looks like it has lots of power, and the 4 on top of that building, that makes 6 masts altogether, almost visible from my house. What is this? Land of the free, home of the irradiated? Now I'm curious. How many cell phone towers do I have around me? Well, the place to look is antennasearch.com. You just type in your address, and then process, and then it'll tell you. So within 4 miles of my house, I have 164 towers. Now listen, I'm not an engineer or a scientist. I'm just a regular guy trying to apply common sense to this invisible world that's encircling all of us. My common sense is telling me that with 164 towers in my neighborhood, it's quite possible the air around me is electric. Let's talk about the human body. I think that many of us understand that for all of its wonderful complexities, the human body is really nothing more than a sack of water attached to a battery. Now, I don't mean to offend anyone. I'm just trying to boil the body down to the basics. Think about it. Everything you see, feel, taste, hear, and smell, the movement of your muscles, the beating of your heart, your thoughts, your memories, all a result of an electrochemical process centered in your brain. Depending on your activity, whether you're sleeping, awake, on high alert, your brain is constantly emitting measurable electric current. The experts call these brain waves. Now back to microwaves. This one belongs to me, and this is a meter that can measure radio and microwave radiation. The way that it reads, it's a very simple meter, but reliable. And at the top line, it's magnetic electric. In the middle, it's magnetic, different range. And the bottom is radio / microwave. That's the one we want to look at. We're going to flip it over to radio microwave. Okay. Now keep in mind that your body is 60% water. Like I was saying before, you're mostly water with a battery. And your brain is 75% water. So we all know what microwaves do to a cup of water. Now this is measuring microwave leak. Okay, so the microwaves leak. By the way, they leak microwaves. So you can see there when it gets up into the dangerous levels, the bottom line you're looking at, it's red. It's in a solid red line. What I'll do is I'll go 2 feet out. Okay, switch to radio microwaves. Alright, here we go. For the purpose of time, I've sped up the film just a little bit, and now you can see we're 2 feet away from the microwave, and the needle in the meter keeps sort of jumping into the red. The solid red line again indicates that the levels are kind of dangerous for human beings, so you don't want to hang out where it's solid red for too long. Now, of course, we're 1 foot away now, and it's a much higher reading, so for the heck of it, I'm going to move it up to 6 inches. And yeah, as you can see, it's really high at 6 inches. But you know, who would hang out 6 inches away from a working microwave? That would be ridiculous. I've just opened a popular app on my phone, one that you use to look at pictures online. And as you can see, the phone is opening the app and beginning to think. The needle begins to spike. Most of us hold our phones while surfing the internet, so this energy would be moving through your hands. Now, as I set this meter to radio microwave, I would really want you to just keep in mind that you're looking at the bottom of the 3 lines here. Let's compare this to the microwave leak again. See how the microwave leak is consistent but never peaks out. This, by the way, is within the legal limits of microwave oven leak. But here, while we're streaming, the needle does peak, and peaks quite a bit. Let's stream some music. I'm opening up the app, and at 1 foot away, It is thinking, and it's still going into the red. While the phone is at rest, I noticed that it peaked for a little bit and then would do nothing for about 30 seconds, then peak again and do nothing for another 30 seconds. I think this pattern would probably repeat itself into infinity. But the real question is, what happens when you're having a phone conversation?
Yeah, it's hot. It's a valley. You know, we're this big San Fernando Valley. All right, cool. The garden is looking limp. The garden.
Here I'm having a conversation with my sister, and I noticed that during the conversation, the needle would go up high when I would talk, and it'd go up high when she would talk. In between, if there was silence, the needle would go down. But that doesn't happen very much during a conversation. Somebody's always talking. So I ran this experiment with speakerphone and without speakerphone, and I got the same results. I think it's time to take this meter on a field trip. I'm across the street from the tower I showed you earlier, and I'm trying to read the RF or radio frequency. And as you can see, the needle is not moving. In reality, this is the wrong meter to measure frequencies from towers. But I can measure the EMF, or electromagnetic frequency. So I flipped the dial to magnetic range 01 to 3, and the line I want you to focus on now is the middle one. The issue I'm having with the readings here is that there are power lines above my head. Now, power lines don't give off radio or microwave, but they do create a strong electromagnetic frequency. So I'm going to go on a walk and take some readings as I go. I'm standing in the driveway of the apartment complex that's closest to the tower. It's about 100 feet away. And the EMF meter has maxed out. I mean, it's not moving at all. And I've never really seen this happen outside before. Now, there might be some solar flares bumping us up, but I doubt it. To give you an idea of other places that EMF occur, let me take you back to my house really quick. EMF is fairly common around your house. You'll find it around appliances and anything electrical. Here the meter is 2 feet from a standard outlet, and as I push right in next to it, you can see that the levels become high. Now I'll do a breaker box. Sustained levels of high electromagnetic field have been linked to cellular damage. This might take place over months or even years, depending on the strength of the field, duration of exposure, and the sensitivity of the individual. So now back on the street, you can see that I'm getting higher levels of EMF than I did right next to my breaker box. But again, these power lines might be skewing my results. In this clip, I've moved far away from any overhead power lines, and to make sure that there are no power lines buried beneath my feet, I've begun with the meter on the ground. And I think that this proves that the high EMF in this area is originating from that tower. Oh, I almost forgot about the cell sites on top of that apartment complex. Those might also be contributing to the high EMF readings I'm getting here. But while the EMF only extends out about a quarter of a city block, within this area they are high. But the EMF is only half the story. The RF or radio frequency is what I'm interested in. The RF from each tower can travel up to 45 miles. So with 164 towers within 4 miles of my house, I really want to know what kind of levels I'm being exposed to. I turned to the computer for the best deal on RF meters and found that to buy one was over my budget. But I rented one here at magneticsciences.com. 3 days after renting the meter, it arrived in the mail, and I was anxious to see what kind of readings I would get around my house. Before I take this RF meter for a spin, I should get a better understanding of the energy that I'm trying to read, because human beings are surrounded by invisible waves, and electromagnetic radiation, commonly known as light, is as old as time itself. The visible light that we humans see is only a sliver of the immense amount of light our sun and other stars and galaxies and nebula and everything else in the universe is creating. In this illustration, you can see that light is divided into 7 parts or spectrums: the radio waves, the microwaves, the infrared, the visible, the ultraviolet, the X-ray, the gamma ray. To give you an idea how they move, the 2 basic units for measuring these waves is hertz and meters. Hertz refers to the frequency or the number of times the signal goes up and down per second, and the wavelength measured in meters refers to the distance in which the wave repeats itself. The distance is measured by marking either between the 2 low points, the troughs, or the high points, the crests. To say electromagnetic waves move up and down is so one-dimensional. You can also think of them moving in an alternating side-to-side motion. Another way of seeing it is like a coiled spring in a circular motion called a sine wave. Humans can also make them move like this. All the invisible and visible waves in the universe are collectively known as galactic cosmic radiation, and it's a life and death issue for astronauts. But here on Earth, we are shielded from this radiation by the opaqueness of the atmosphere and the Earth's magnetosphere. Because the Earth acts like a giant magnet, it shields the planet from much of these invisible waves. But because of that opaqueness of the atmosphere, many radio waves do make it through. And here is a sample of natural radio waves that occur in a very low frequency. In this audio clip, a completely natural radio transmission is being produced by the sun's interaction with the Earth. The visual clip is the aurora from space, and even though this is not the sound of the aurora, both are produced by the same thing: light energy from the sun. The first modern AM radio station began transmitting on November 2nd, 1920 by station KDKA out of East Pittsburgh. The first commercial FM station was out of Nashville, Tennessee in 1941. Fast forward to 1973 and the first handheld wireless phone call was made. And on March 6, 1983, the first 1G network rolled out across America. In 1985, there were a little over 340,000 cell phone subscribers in the US. In 1990, over 5 million. And in the year 2000, over 100 million. And in the year 2010, over 300 million subscribers. And with all those subscribers, including me, comes a support system, the network, the cell towers. The foundation for all this new technology being safe is that the energy is non-ionizing radiation. Back to the light chart, you'll see that everything on this side of the visible light is ionizing, meaning that the light particles have enough energy to strip electrons from atoms, making DNA vulnerable to mutation. And everything on this side of the visible light is non-ionizing, meaning that it may have heating effects in the case of high-powered radio and microwave, but no direct DNA damage. This science fact is repeatedly cited as the main reason wireless technology is safe. National Cancer Institute's website under key points can be summarized like this. Cell phones emit non-ionizing radiation which can be absorbed by tissue. Studies thus far have not shown a consistent link between cell phone use and cancers. More research is needed. The Daily Mail reports a 2-year study out of Finland that concludes that the radiation from mobile phones may disable a safety barrier in the body which protects the brain from harmful substances in the blood. Meanwhile, the Consumers Association of England said that there is still insufficient evidence to say that mobiles are safe. Communication Workers of America, a union protecting the rights and safety of those people working closest to this energy sources, states on their website, "At the present time, there is substantial scientific data that establishes negative health effects associated with microwave radiation." They go on to say that they need more research. As I sift through the internet, it becomes clear that the scientific jury is still out. All the while, the bureaucrats and telecom companies built the grid with the mantra, "Trust us, it's safe, but we're doing more research." Then it occurred to me, the subject of their research is us. Now, I'd like to make it clear that I don't believe in some grand conspiracy by the FCC and private companies to directly harm the American people. I do see evidence that there was a deliberate rush to get the grid up and block public objections in the name of better service. I'm not interested in that right now, and all I want to do is document the radio and microwave energy that we are being exposed to here in the beginning of the 21st century. And this meter can give me a broad idea of our exposure. The antenna in this meter is responsive from 200 megahertz to 8 gigahertz. That covers most wireless technology from the radio well into the microwave spectrum. And this meter is kind of cool because it displays both the volts and the microwatts simultaneously. The microwatts per meter squared is on the right and the volts per meter is on the left. I was told to visualize watts and volts in terms of a garden hose. Watts would be like the volume of water coming out of the hose. Little water, low watts. Lots of water, high watts. And volts would be like the pressure of the water. Higher the volts, higher the force. There is also a digital display on top to give exact numbers. This meter takes readings in fractions of seconds and constantly updates the numbers based on the energy in the air 1 square meter in front of it. I turn it on in my living room, and the first thing I notice are the flickering lights. Obviously, that means it's detecting some energy. The second thing I notice is the clicking sound coming from the speaker on the back. The clicking is indicating that the energy source is Wi-Fi, and I can tell that it's coming from my computer desk. Wi-Fi operates around 2.4 gigahertz. That's 2.4 billion cycles per second, the same frequency as your microwave oven. The lights on this meter are jumping up and down because the signal is not steady like an analog signal. Instead, it's digital, and it's kind of like flipping your lights on and off. In front of my computer, I'm getting an average of 2 volts with peaks over 400 microwatts. In order for me to get an accurate reading of the energy coming from the nearby cell towers, I first have to turn all this stuff off. So, I turn off the Bluetooth, and I disable the airport, and I'm still getting readings. Well, yeah, my printer is wireless. I don't know how to disable that, so I'm just going to unplug it. Right next to the printer, the volt side of the meter is peaking, and the microwatts have gone over 10,000. I think I'm going to keep this thing unplugged from now on, and only plug it in when I need to print something. Now that's more like it. I have to say I'm very happy with the numbers in this room. I'm going to move around my house to see what else I get. In the front bedroom, the meter is making this sort of scratchy, out-of-tune radio noise, and that means that the main energy it's picking up is originating from a cell site. At the living room window, the energy is the most intense, with peaks of over 40 microwatts and 22 volts. My head is swimming with questions, and one of them is, what the heck is a microwatt? 1 watt equals 1 million microwatts. The FCC limit per meter squared is 10 million microwatts per square meter and 61 volts. This limit is agreed upon by many countries and is known as the science-based approach. The meter I have would peak out well before that. This meter peaks at a level known as the precautionary approach. Who's adopted the precautionary approach? Countries like Italy and Switzerland. Russia and China have set limits 100 times less than the United States. The reason? Potential health risks. According to the guideline of the Austrian Medical Association, the Austrians feel that anything between 1 and 10 microwatts is slightly above normal, and anything 10 to 1,000 is far above normal, and everything over 1,000, they say, is very far above normal. In other words, anything above 1,000 microwatts, you should leave. So when I compare the two approaches to regulating this energy, on one hand, you have the science-based approach, which allows 10 million microwatts and 61 volts, and on the other hand, you have the precautionary approach, which allows only 100,000 microwatts and 6 volts. Then I have to ask you this question. If your reception was the same, and you could surf the internet just as fast, then which approach would you want your government to adopt? What I noticed about my house is that the meter would spike next to windows, so I finally went outside and I pointed the meter in the direction of the towers. And I was really shocked. of what it read. In some places, the energy was over 600 microwatts. Down around 6 feet, it was a steady 400 microwatts with almost a full volt. Because this meter combines all the RF and microwave frequency together in one lump sum, I'm not able to distinguish how much energy is coming from the apartment building, the tower, or the palm tree. But through the miracle of film, I can show you a day where high winds knocked out a main transformer, shutting down the electrical grid to the apartment complex. So with that cell site off, and only the tower and tree working, I rushed out to measure the energy. Before the power went out, there was over 600 microwatts in this area, and now it peaks at 40. The volts have also gone down. It seems strange to me that these towers were allowed to be grouped together in such a heavily residential neighborhood. Later, when the electricity was restored, I walked to the shopping center that sits in the crosshairs of these cell sites. Seems anybody working or shopping here is exposed to levels the Austrian Medical Association have classified as very far above normal. I took a walk in the other direction to see if I could find a place where the meter read nothing, and 7 streets later this is as close as I came. As I walked further, the levels rose because of this other cell site. On my way back, I came across the local elementary school, and here the meter began clicking, indicating wireless. I stood in front of the thick, heavy door of the elementary school classroom, and through the door, the energy was obvious. Honestly, it kind of disturbed me to see this energy here. Why should I be concerned about wireless in an elementary school? Because children's bodies are smaller than adults, and the energy penetrates farther into them. Also, their little bodies have more water content, so they're more conductive. In this Yale study, pregnant mice were exposed to RF frequencies from cell phones. The offspring of those mice exposed were hyperactive and had decreased memory. I also found this news story out of Denmark. 5 high school girls for a science fair project tried to germinate 2 groups of garden cress seeds. One group would be placed next to wireless routers, and the other group set away from the wireless. The group away from the wireless sprouted like normal. The seeds next to the routers all died. So what's the solution? The answer is simple. Plug it in. A wired system is cheaper to set up, costs less to maintain, and provides faster internet. The next day at work, I told a friend about the meter I had rented, and he said, "I have some of those cell towers on my roof. You want to come take a look?" And I said, "Sure." Sure enough, as I approached the building, the RF levels grew steadily higher, until there was over 11,000 microwatts and over 4 volts on the sidewalk. With this amount of energy, there must be a cell site around. But where? From the outside of this building, you would never suspect a thing, but the meter doesn't lie. And inside the elevator on the bottom floor, the energy drops off completely. And as the elevator climbs, suddenly the meter springs to life. Upon entering my friend's apartment, my first impression was, "Nice pad." Then I turned the meter on. Moving this meter in different directions can make a dramatic difference in the intensity of the energy. But no matter where I walked in my friend's apartment, the levels never drop below 1,000 microwatts. In fact, it's averaging well over 2,000, and in places the meter went over 11,000 microwatts, and that's in his living room. Above his bed, over 5,000 microwatts and 3 volts. He showed me a spot where the cell site was visible from his window. Then, we walked 20 paces from his front door to one of those warning signs, and the sign was certainly correct. As soon as we passed the signs, the levels climbed to the top of this meter. We go to the spot he wants me to see because these are the cell sites that are directly over his apartment. Hanging out in a place that's over 100,000 microwatts is not a good idea because eventually it can cause permanent damage to your eyes and other organs. This precautionary limit was set for a reason, so while standing on this roof, I can't help but wonder why this site and millions of others like it are allowed to go up without any shielding for the residents living here. My friend asked his landlord about the situation, and the landlord said it's all legal, and the company that put them up said it was safe. but the landlord's receiving payments by hosting this site, and I doubt if he has any intention on having them removed. Then my friend asked me if there was anything he could do about it, and I said, there is this paint. It's called Y-Shield, and it's made to block radio waves. I explained that it needed to be grounded for maximum effectiveness, and I wasn't quite sure how to do that. But I thought that it could block some of the energy without grounding. Is that a chance you're willing to take? He said, I don't care. I want to paint my ceiling. Let's do this. Today. So we ordered some paint online, and when it arrived, we wasted no time. When he finished painting the first section of ceiling, it was getting late, and we called it a night. The next day, after painting the ceiling over his bed, he had me over again with the meter, and now instead of 5,000 microwatts, the signal was attenuated to 600 around his bed, and in the area of the living room, where it once read over 11,000 microwatts, it now peaked at 1,400. Even though I still considered this high, my friend was happy with the results. Before I left his place, he showed me a vacant apartment next to his. Seems anyone renting this place will be exposed to over 1 volt and around 900 microwatts 24/7. As I drove away, I have to be honest. The idea of landlords capitalizing by hosting cell sites on their residential buildings seemed wrong. But I don't blame the landlords or even the telecom companies. I blame the regulators, the lawmakers, for being so naive and trusting that the telecom companies would do what's right. Shame on you, Congress. I bet not one member of Congress would put up with a cell tower above their bed. I drove all around, stopping in places of interest, like this tower next to the freeway. It's powerful enough to peak out this meter. And you see that apartment building next to it? The tenants in the apartment facing the towers are living at ground zero. While driving around the freeways of Los Angeles, I noticed that the meter always indicated the presence of energy. This is because there is such an overlap of cell sites that when I would leave the range of one, I'd come into the range of another. I'm sorry about my dirty windows. Here's a strange one. The meter peaked while driving past this spot. I looked for a tower, but realized the energy was coming from those fake boulders. The property is owned by a church. And that's not the only church hosting cell sites. I found this one, and this one, and this one, and this. I know a trend when I see one. This particular church has a playground directly in line with the tower. Let me ask you, is this what Jesus would do? Put up a tower next to the children? Maybe Jesus and his disciples could have made an extra buck hosting a cell site at the Sermon on the Mount. But I don't think so. That doesn't sound like Jesus' style. In fact, he was the guy that kicked the money changers out of the temple. I think that if a church is going to make a monthly profit by hosting a cell site, that church should have its non-profit status revoked. All this driving around put me in the mood for a road trip, so I drove to remote places outside of Los Angeles to see what the energy was like there. Here in Topanga State Park, no lights, no sound. A campground in Malibu, nothing. The high desert, not much. But I still had reception in these places, and that's because a mobile phone can still get a signal with 0.00003 volts per meter, and the watts, well, they're still around too. It's just below microwatts, maybe in the nanowatts or even picowatts, or even lower. I drove up north to the town of my birth because I received some tips that the landscape was changing there as well. I was told about a tower that was recently built on the grounds of a high school. I went to a football game at that high school and measured the energy around the stands. In the parking lot behind the bleachers, over 4 volts and 11,000 microwatts. See that red light in the sky? That light sits on top of the tower. While standing in the bleachers, the energy was highest on the home side. In this section, the volts topped out the meter at 6 and over 21,000 microwatts. I was shocked. I believe this is a lot of power, and to have it placed right on top of a school not only seemed wrong, it seemed criminal. Do we Americans really want our kids learning and playing under cell towers when studies have linked RF radiation to everything from autism-like behavior to reproductive harm? I left that night with a sinking feeling in my stomach, and the next day I went to another football game, and this one was at my old junior college. Sitting in this part of the stadium, I'm reading an average of 2,000 microwatts with peaks over 6,000. But where is it coming from? If you look through those trees, you'll see it. Here's another perspective. In the guest seating, the energy level was much higher. At the base of this tower is one of those signs stating that if you move past the sign, the RF levels exceed the FCC limits. I have found this to be false. That's because the way these things amplify the signal, the visual sign is correct. The energy spreads out like a cone, and if you're standing at the base of the tower, much of the energy is traveling over you. But the areas directly surrounding the tower are hit the hardest, like the stadium seating, and these tennis courts, and this baseball field, and this school courtyard. RF energy does drop off pretty fast. Every time you double the distance from the energy source, the energy drops off times 4. But if the tower is in your school or neighborhood, how are you going to get away? Online, I found plenty of news stories about schools with towers, and every one of the stories involved concerned and upset parents trying to block the towers. Buried in many of these stories was this bit of info. According to the 1996 Federal Telecommunications Act, municipalities are not legally able to cite health concerns as a reason for blocking tower construction. What? This can't be right. I visit the FCC website to understand why it's illegal to block tower construction based on health concerns. I watched about 5 hours of hearings there and got a pretty good idea of how it works. In this hearing, the telecom spokespeople talked about the importance of using our court systems to rush site applications through. In their words, delayed processing impedes deployment. But in English, no tower plus no service equals no profit. As I was driving back to Los Angeles, I have to say, I was mad. Mad at our government for acting like a lapdog to these telecom companies and not caring about the safety of the American people first. Are we losing our democratic republic because a government run by corporations is called fascism? Yep, I'm mad, and the time for talking is over. But what can I do about it? I'm just an artist. That's how I make my living, making things. I guess that's what I'll do. I'll make something. Something simple, like a sign. They have their sign. Well, I'll make mine. What will it say? Well, the only thing that I know for sure, and that is, this is not a tree. To be absolutely clear, I love the information age and would never want to go backward. I like surfing the internet with my phone and talking with my loved ones from almost anywhere. But this technology demands respect. There is even a warning in my phone under the legal terms of agreement. This model warns the user to keep a distance of 10 millimeters between the device and your body at all times. And that's easy enough with a cell phone. Just use speakerphone or plug in some earphones when talking. But what about distancing yourself from a tower? The energy emitted from towers has so much more power and is projecting right through buildings, cars, and our bodies. But with more and more cell sites springing up daily, how do we keep a respectful distance, especially when they invade our most public and private places, our homes, shopping centers, schools, and church? In the last 2 decades, the energy in our cities and small towns have changed in a profound way. There has to be an answer. A way that we, the citizens, can ensure the grid goes up with respect for the people it serves. As Americans, oftentimes nothing will happen until we demand it. We need to put pressure on our lawmakers to ensure the grid is built and rebuilt with caution and not impunity. As Americans, I know we can do this if we want to. I know we can figure out appropriate places to put these towers, where caution and human safety come first. This has been an approved message from me, the Bee. And I made this not to scare you, but to empower you with information, so that you will know for sure that this is not a tree.